Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up. All right, great. First of all, welcome. This is always one of my favorite presentations is the show and tell. It has a long history. It goes back to actually our first meeting that we ever had a show and tell component with it. It's always been a popular feature. One thing I want to let you know is as a nonprofit organization, we are required to have an annual meeting every year. This year, it's really kind of simple because there's no election. The next election will be next December. But I thought I'd use this opportunity just to update you on just a couple things before I turn it back to Marty. I mean to Dana. We had a board meeting as usual earlier today, and we got a summary on some stuff that I thought I'd share with you. Right now, we have about 334 members. And it so happens that's almost identical to the number that we had last year at this time. We did gain some members, about 30, 35 or so, but of course we lost some, mostly through passings and deaths. But we seem to be stabilizing our membership. We'd like to increase that, of course. So if you have any suggestions, if you want to publicize our organization to others so we increase our membership, that would be great. I also want to let you know that our finances are in pretty good shape. It's been kind of rocky ever since the COVID, but I can assure you that for the next year or so, there'll be no increase in the dues. And that is a little bit unusual. Many organizations have to increase their dues because of increased expenses, but we're holding our road on that. As far as, FSNE is expensive to run. We have to rent a warehouse when we send out the journal, which I'm hoping will be going out in the mail next week. We have to pay for that printing and postal costs. We have snapshots that we have to print and send. And of course, we usually give our guest speakers an honorarium. It is expensive to run. On the other hand, we have money coming in. Of course, we have the dues, but they don't come close to covering expenses. We have an investment account that we've had from very early years that produces interest, and we try to live off that interest, the dues, and most importantly, donations that have come in. Whenever anybody sends in a donation of cash or even a camera, of course, as you know, we have a very active program putting stuff up on eBay and putting that stuff out at the Photographica shows, which is another source of income from us. That helps offset expenses. And we did a pretty good job of that last year. I do want to single out Henry Weisenberg. His family was nice enough to have us put out his estate for a certain percentage to co-sign the items. And that brought in a nice piece of change this year. It's somewhat unique. We don't expect too many of those types of collections. But again, if you are thinking of donating to FSNE, please start thinking about it and just do it. And if you're making out wills or thinking about how you want to dispose of your collections down the line, please keep us in mind. One last thing, as in the annual meeting, I do want to thank so many people, for having, I think, a very good year. We had some great speakers, thanks to Dana, and the rest of the board members and other people. We've just been so great in helping me and helping this organization. I think do very well in the last year, and hopefully for many more years to come. As I did mention, the annual the anniversary issue of the journal is very, very late this year, and I apologize for that. We're hoping to get that mailed later this week, so you should have that maybe even before Christmas. We'll see. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Dana. I should tell you, Dana and I were talking right before the meeting about a problem that we may have when people spend more than 5 or 6 minutes on the presentation. So I would again ask, as Dan already mentioned, to really keep track of your time, and so we can get all of the 10 presentations in. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dana. Dana?
Okay, thanks, John. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Um, Welcome everyone to the fourth annual PHSNE Show and Tell holiday party on Zoom. Um, Last year we had a 50th anniversary of PHSNE presentation instead. So this is the fourth time we've done this on Zoom, and I'm really excited. We have some wonderful topics for people to discuss. You all probably know the screen by now, but for this, speaker view is best. So if you go up to the top right corner, you should have a view button and choose speaker so that the person who is speaking will be like almost full screen, so you can see whatever they're sharing. Folks who are presenting will be allowed to share their screens, or I will share for them. And We're going to start off with a presentation from Bernie Zelich. Bernie, it's all yours. Bernie, are you going to go ahead and share your screen? We can't hear you. Uh, Bernie, we can't hear anything.
Now you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. I'm so sorry. Um, Now I gotta go. So now you see my screen and you hear me. Okay. Okay, terrific. Okay. So so I don't collect antique photo equipment. I collect antique photo evidence. As some of you know, I for the last 3 years I've discovered Annie Powell,
You can watch it
1859.
anyways. Okay,
Don't- don't-
don't
yeah.
know, but when you come on, that's tough.
Hello? Okay. So I discovered Annie Powell, a major photographer in Lowell, Massachusetts, 3 years ago, and I collect evidence. Uh, Starting with 3 years ago, here's two photos. Can you see the right photo, or am I covering it with my view of myself? Um, I'll assume you can. And so this is one on the left from about age 15, 1865. And one of the pieces of evidence there is she was a photographer at an early age. She has a box camera next to her. And on the right, that's her at 87 in 1946. And one of the pieces of evidence is that she was in pretty good shape at a late age, which explains a very long life and prolific. Even into her 80s, she was taking lots of photos. So I attribute some 4 or 5,000 photos to her that are in collections which are unattributed or misattributed, most of them being at the National Park in Lowell and the Center for Lowell History part of UMass. And there are other places as well. And it's quite a bit to say because she rarely advertised herself as a photographer. This is one of the few instances of her and her husband advertising in 1906. So my job really is to come up with a lot of evidence. One of the pieces of evidence I come up with regularly is photos of her at work. This is a great one. Unfortunately, it's her backside in 1903 after a gunpowder explosion in what was then Tewksbury, now Lowell. She's walking away from her camera. And this is a blow up. I had to really look at a big picture and blow it up a great deal to see it, but she was really at work. The other is I collect evidence of handwriting, both her handwriting, other photographers' handwriting, and the proliferation of handwriting over many years for municipal photos, like this one. So, and these. So I made a collage of her handwriting for municipal photos from 1916 to the mid 1940s, and it's remarkably the same. I say it's her handwriting, it's consistent. No one else has said it's her handwriting, but I've compared it to her note handwriting, and it matches as does not match other photographers at the time, including her husband's handwriting. And as an extra special piece of evidence, we have two of her photos, municipal photos, where on the back side, she lists some descriptions as well as in larger settings, 6.3 at 30 seconds. The same image elsewhere is 6.3, 15 seconds. And so it was the photographer, and the photographer was Annie Powell. So she died in this house in the Lowell Highlands, and years later, her descendants grew up not knowing who she was, but living with her photos. And the other day, one of the best pieces of evidence I had was some oral history. Her descendant, Renee Noel, was in one of my talks, and she kind of stole the show properly when she described coming downstairs and seeing her photos and her storage cabinet. So I recorded this for a video, which I'm going to play now.
This is a basement that's over 100 years old, very cold, I would say a little creepy, was always exciting and scary to enter the basement. It was very dim and has that settler smell to it. And as you go down the stairs, I think there may have been two sets of what I'm calling apothecary drawers. And I do remember those little glass slides that would be there.
Apothecary drawers with glass slides. Well, they no longer existed in that basement, but this is what they would have looked like. But the apothecary drawer still did exist. I hadn't been in that basement. She was the one that unleashed that bombshell that the storage area that she remembered with glass plate negatives was down there. And it looks something like this. It's now a washroom. And that sort of allows us to say that this, which I thought was the makings of a dark room, it certainly looked that way, was certainly a dark room because they were next to each other. So that gives us a great deal of evidence legitimatizing her as a major prolific photographer. And so just to conclude, the apothecary drawers tell us that Annie had her own darkroom, probably starting 1923, when her niece and nephew bought that house, that she was a photographer, and she was prolific. 1923 also corresponds to a change in the way negatives were provided to the city engineers. So they are acetate copies of glass plate negatives after 1923, and this solidifies her authorship of these photos based on what we now see her biography, that she moved in 1920 to that basement. So what happened to thousands of glass plate negatives? Several family members described those which were no longer there. The family history says the glass plate negatives included mill worker photos as well as buildings. Well, in the late 1970s, they were sold to an antiques dealer, says the family. So most were lost, but in 1989, just a few years later, a box of 130 glass plate negatives of uncertain provenance was brought to UMass Lowell. They contained mill worker photos. These photos and the photos that Annie left behind have at least one subject in common and much similarity in style and technique. So I guess the lesson here, and I'm coming up on my time, is that if you ask around and you wait around, sometimes you get some good luck.
Thank you, Bernie. That's great. And if you could stop sharing your screen for the next person, that would be great. That was wonderful. Really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. We have.
Hello, can you hear me? I'll quickly tell you a little bit about my life over the past 6 months. My wife and I moved up to Maine 3 years ago. We've been trying to buy a house, not able to. Well, we found one back in May in Camden, Maine, and we were there looking at the house, and my wife and I. And then the next day, I went there by myself to look at it again. And while I was there, I noticed an older couple behind their house next door to me. So I'm a cold caller type person, so I just walked over and started talking to them. And they were quite a bit older than me, probably late 70s. And I after a few minutes, I asked the guy, "Are you retired?" And he says, "Yes, I'm retired now, for the most part." I said, "Where did you work?" He goes, I worked at the Savannah College of Art and Design." Oh, all right. I thought about going there, 40 some odd years ago. And he said, "What did you teach?" And he goes, "Large format photography." And I said, "You're kidding me." So immediately in my head, I said, "I'm buying this house. Uh, Somehow I'm going to buy it." And the first question I had for him was, "Do you like coffee?" I like to sit down at cafes with photographers and talk. So we talked a little bit. He told me all about his life, and he's very busy. Still works at the main media workshops. And I had to build myself up a little bit. So I told him I've shot for historic New England, Boston Architectural College's documentation class. I had photographs before the Mass Historic Commission, and I shot for the Providence Preservation Society years ago. And he asked me, "Do you know any of the photographers in the area?" I said, "I don't know any photographers in the area." And he goes, "Just 2 blocks away from here is Brian Vandenbrink, who's quite a well-known New England architectural photographer." And I had heard of him because I started back in '05. I'm the one that started the Architectural Photography Network at the BSA. And we had many people come there talking to us and actually come to many meetings, Steve Dunwell, Peter Vanderwalker, Steve Rosenthal, all those guys. And I tried to get Brian there from Maine, and he never made it down because it was too far of a ride, I guess. So that was pretty interesting. I ended up meeting Brian several times for coffee, and we talked about those things. And then, by the way, that guy's name was Craig Stevens, the guy that worked at Savannah and now Maine Media. And he asked, "Do you know Tillman Crane?" I said, "I've heard of him, but I've never talked to him or anything like that." He guess he gives workshops all the way across the U.S. He's 2 blocks in the other direction, just down the street here. And I said, "Oh my gosh." There are plenty of photographers in that town. I can't believe it. Peter Ralston has got his own shop, and many others. So a month or two later, I got a call from someone with the Army Corps of Engineers and the Maine Historic Preservation Commission. They picked me to document a building in Bar Harbor. And I said, "Where did you find me, or how did you find me?" He goes, "Well, you seem to be the only person that shoots large format in Maine." And I immediately said, "No, no, there's plenty of people that shoot large format." But I've done it before, the Habs photography. So I put together a quote for the work and sent that off to them. And within a day or two, they said, "Yes, okay, we'll go with that." And then I realized that maybe a few days later that I could not do that job. There's just I have so much going on at this house I'm working on that I just really can't do the time to do that. So I got a hold of my neighbor again, Craig Stevens, and he says, "I know a bunch of people that shoot large format." So he found a woman, I think around late 40s, late 30s, early 40s, who was deep into large format. And so we talked a bit, and she decided to try to do the job. She sent a quote in, got the job, and has done it. I suppose it did come out very nicely. So it's nice to have a neighbor that knows just about anybody. In fact, these people I talked about, Brian Vanderbrink and Tillman Crane, they all were in his classes. So he's taught a lot of people how to shoot. Now, let me quickly say that it's sad for me. I don't make a living at photography. I make money sometimes, but that's not my career. But these guys, that's their full-time jobs. And as I've talked to them, I've realized that they're both shooting digital now, simply because the clients want digital. They want the images very quickly, which is very sad for me because I'm still shooting sheet film. And then he told me about one other person that lived in the area, someone that's probably well known in the U.S. It's Paul Caponegro. Very well known. And I said, I saw him just a few weeks ago. I said, not him, but I saw Craig. And I said, "Hey, what a chance to see him, Paul Caponegro. I'd like to drop in and have a cup of coffee with him and talk to him." And Craig looks at me and goes, "He just died." I said, "Oh my God." He was 90 or 91 years old. And it was very, very sad. But that's pretty much the story of 6 months of my life. I'm always looking for people that shoot film. In fact, I saw a kid at an antique store the other day who was looking at an old camera, an old Pentax. I forget the 6x7. And I immediately walked up to him. The first thing I said out of my mouth is, "You like film photography?" He goes, "That's all I shoot." I said, "Okay, that's good." Okay, that's the end of my story.
Thanks, Drew. That's amazing. And we have a presenter in February who shoots large format, Barbara Bosworth. So you'll enjoy
Okay.
that.
I'll
Yeah,
be here. I'll be here.
yeah. And I see Pentax is now making a new film camera. I just saw it in B&H's.
Really?
Yes, yes. I think it's a half frame. Has anybody else seen that?
Oh.
Um,
No.
thank you so much. That's wonderful. And next up, we have Ken.
Well, how do I get onto, how do I do this?
I can
I
see
hit
you.
share screen. Dana, can you hear me?
I can hear you, and I can see you facing your
How
screen,
do
but
I
I'm
get,
trying to use
okay,
another.
I don't do this too often. So how do I get on to my camera onto the main screen?
Uh,
You're on it.
yeah, we can see you.
Okay, how do I make it bigger? Am I bigger on your screen?
Oh, if you go up to view in the top right corner and do speaker view, then you'll see yourself large instead of a tiny square. There's a icon up at the top right that says view. And if you change that to speaker, you'll see yourself larger.
Mute me. And did I show up big now?
Yes, you'll have to keep talking to stay big.
Okay, I got it. Okay, thank you. Now, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I collect Deerdorfs, of course, we all know that, but I don't like talking about Deerdorfs because that's all I ever talk about. And so I started collecting Kodak specials. And Kodak specials are these little guys right here. Actually, some of them aren't little, some of them are quite big. But the one Kodak special that I like to talk about is the Vest Pocket Kodak. The Vest Pocket Kodak started out with this camera, 1912. I'll bring it in a little bit closer. Simple achromat lens, no autographic feature at all, fixed focus. And Kodak very rapidly decided that they should have a camera that was a little bit better, using the same chassis as the regular one, but they put a better lens on. Same shutter, but a better lens. And the lenses could be Bausch and Lomb, they could be Zeiss, they could be Kodak lenses, Kodak Anastigma F77s, which were the big ones, or the major ones that Kodak produced. They were leather covered and they were, quote, special. Okay, so now the one I really like talking about is this one. This one has a Compor shutter on it. There's about a dozen that are known of. It has the same chassis as a regular Vest Pocket Kodak, but the front of the shutter, or the front of the camera, is also the front of the shutter. And this camera has a focusable lens. It's f4.5. I'm sorry. Yeah, 4.9, sorry. And it's a great little camera. You got to pull it out all the way to shoot it. In fact, that's common with all these Vest Pockets. And with the proliferation of 127 film again, well, perhaps I shouldn't use the word proliferation. Let's just say 127 film is out there and you can find it if you know where to look. B&H. That's the number one spot I would go to. Anyway, Kodak, over a period of time, came up with a lot of specials. And the other specials that I like are, well, let's pull the 3A out. This is hardly a pocketable camera unless you're Captain Kangaroo. But this camera has a rangefinder on it. And this made it very unique and very, well, high end for the day. It has an Optimo shutter. This one has a Kodak Anastigmat on it, but it also takes really sharp pictures. And Kodak saw the need for a standard chassis on the camera, and then a fancy lens and a fancy shutter. So Kodak did that for almost up to the 1940s. The last one would be probably the Bantam Special. And so the Bantam Special came out, designed by Teague, who's an Indiana resident, although he left Indiana rapidly as a young man and went to New York to become a designer. I highly recommend that you look Walter Dorwin Teague up and learn about him. And that's it.
Thank you, Ken.
That's
Fantastic.
okay. 5 minutes, 6 minutes on the button.
Thank you.
You're
Wonderful.
welcome.
Thanks. Next up, we have Bill. And Bill, I'm going to share your slides.
Thank you.
Let me just pull those up. Hang on one second. Let me share my screen. Can you see that?
Yep, I can.
Okay, let me just get into slideshow. Come on. Okay, there we go.
Okay. Back in 2009, I wrote a book about Pauline Cushman, a biography of a woman who was a 19th century actress and a Civil War spy. And the cover photo is actually a photo I bought on eBay of an Ohio militia captain. It's actually Pauline Cushman. She's wearing a fake mustache and imperial and a uniform that she was entitled to wear because James Garfield, who later became president, gave her a piece of paper that said she was an honorary major. So we can go on to the next slide. Her name was Pauline Cushman on stage, but her real name was Harriet Wood. She was married 3 times. Charles Dickinson, a Civil War musician and soldier, August Fichtner, and Jeremiah Fryer, her longest marriage when she moved to Arizona. Her nicknames were Aunt Hat and Mrs. Ward. She spent a couple years traveling around raising money for the Fenians in upstate New York and traveled with an Irish comedian, James M. Ward. And he was a Irishman and Catholic. She was not. But whenever they appeared together, sometimes she would, for propriety's sake, would claim to be Mrs. Ward, but they were never married. Next slide. These are what I consider maybe the earliest images. If you look at her hair, it appears to be parted in the middle, which was typical of women of the period. And she's not wearing any of the dresses that at the later image. But on the bottom, you can see the inscription that accompanied her images that she sold when she was giving her lectures as a spy. Next image. These are pictures of her theatrical career. The one on the left is she's in the character of Mazeppa, which was a Tartar prince that was strapped naked to a horse. And in the theater, they had a horse on a treadmill. And not only her, but Ida Menken would appear in tights and be strapped to this horse. And the horse would go prancing along the treadmill and make for an exciting theater stage. But she left home when she was 18 from Michigan and went to New York and was assigned to a theater in New Orleans. And she went down to New Orleans, and the theater burnt down. They married her first husband, Charles Dickinson, a musician in the theater company from Cleveland, Ohio. And later, in the 1850s, she and he lived in Cleveland for a while. The picture on the far right might be her, we're not sure, but it certainly has some facial features. Next slide. These are more the interesting photos. On the left is a uniform that was made for her by the women of Nashville when she was done with her 30 days of spying in Tennessee. The picture of the one that was used on the book cover was taken in Cincinnati. Notice she has captain's bars and she sings a song called Mother, I've Been Promoted. And later she does appear, and her other uniforms do have small major's insignia. And this is the whole photo. I have other images of her in this exact uniform. And this is another view of that with her signature in there. Next slide. Oop.
Oh, hang on a sec.
Yeah, okay. And here's an assortment of images of her taken in the summer of 1864 by, oh, go back one. By Bogardus, and she was on stage at Barnum's Museum for 6 weeks and dressed in this uniform. You can see the insignia of the major there. The one on the far right is could be Mrs. Pauline Cushman, but I haven't been able to verify it. Her hair is much shorter. She's said to have had long black uh, hair and black eyes, very definite black eyes. And these images are part of 80 known images of Pauline Cushman. My wife and I have 20 in our collection. And hopefully, besides the biography that I did write about her, before too long, I'd like to put this together in just a series of photos, like a coffee table book of all the images that I've been able to come up of her. Next page. These are pictures taken at the same time in a dress. And notice that it's not the one that I showed at the beginning, is an earlier one. You can see definitely she doesn't part her hair in the middle. She parts it on the side in more masculine fashion, except this image on the right, which was taken in Boston. I'd like to know more about this photographer, but this is definitely Pauline Cushman with her hair almost in the center. A friend of mine went to a gun show in Baltimore, and she called me up and said, I found this picture of Pauline Cushman. Do you want it? And she described it, and I said, sure, I'll take it for sure. And I still haven't got the bill for her buying the picture for me. So she's a very good friend that allowed me to use this photo. But she had a face that when she was about 30 years old, she could appear as a young boy, or she could appear as an older woman. It's just an interesting character study. Next picture. This is one I don't have in my collection. This is in the Western Reserve Historical Society. It's a image that P.T. Barnum sold at the museum of her with a number of her military and civilian images. I would like to get that. The other one of her in the Nashville uniform, the one in Cleveland, and the one in taken in Cincinnati are in our collection. Next slide. She published a pamphlet that she sold during her lectures. Excuse me, and then P.T. Barnum embellished it. The picture on the right is from a broadside. I've never found the picture that the image on the left is from, but the picture on the right comes from this image of her down below. The three pictures on the bottom were from about 1868 to 1870. As she signed it, you can see she's changed her appearance somewhat. Next page. These are illustrations of her from a book by Sarmiento. Ferdinand Sarmiento was a attorney and a merchant tailor. He kind of wrote a book about her and her spy adventures. I went through the book and it's only 50% accurate. But she did appear On stage in breeches roles or men's roles, she also in her activity as a spy dressed as a man, especially when she was with the Confederates. They did dress her in Confederate uniforms. Next slide. Next slide.
I am not able to advance. Hang on a second. Let
Oh,
me, hang on, Bill. Sorry.
okay. She was said to have given a toast to Jefferson Davis for $300 in Louisville. There's no evidence that she ever did that, but she did portray a newspaper boy outside the theater, and she dressed as he, did give a, a sort of a toast to Jefferson Davis out on the street. These pictures of her in captivity or in a dungeon where Confederate General Bragg supposedly held her. She was actually in a house belonging to some Confederate doctor. She was never in a prison. She was threatened to be hung, but General Bragg, I don't think would ever have hung a woman. And then P.T. Barnum used these to illustrate her captivity. So, next slide. After the Civil War, she did appear in a kind of a dressed up military uniform. She has a GAR badge on her uniform in the center, but she was never a member of the GAR. In fact, the ladies of the Women's Relief Corps of the GAR gave her a hard time about even making a request to live in the Women's Relief Corps quarters in California when she was out there. So, as an actress, she was not held in high repute. And in fact, in 1868, she's accused of being a pickpocket and she disappears for 2 or 3 years. I don't know if I haven't found the court records, but she was sent to the prison in New York City for as part of supposedly being a pickpocket. And she disappears until about 1870 from 1868 to 70 from the theatrical newspapers. And the picture on the left is an advertisement where she's returned from England, but there's no evidence that she ever returned from England. Next slide, please. These are pictures from the 1870s as she made her way across the United States, traveling on the Transcontinental Railroad and, to start a second career in San Francisco, which she appeared on stage, but it didn't really go very well. Pauline Cushman seemed to be on the bipolar express. Besides having a drinking problem, she often took laudanum and other drugs to deal with some health issues related to her heart. The picture on the right is the last known formal portrait of her just before she was married to her second husband. I've never been able to identify the man in the smaller picture in the center, but it was taken in uh, uh, Kansas on her trip across the United States. She did meet an Army officer, Samuel Orr, who was a contract officer, a surgeon who had fought in the Civil War, and he was headed out west to the Arizona Territory, where he ended up witnessing the surrender of the Apache chief Cochise and his tribe. As a doctor, he had to go out into the Superstition Mountains and treat the Indian children who were sick. So these pictures were given to a newspaperman named Alf Doughton when she tried to make an appearance in Nevada. She got on stage and she started to give a lecture, and she had an assistant that was behind her on the stage fooling around, and the theater was filled with drunken miners, and they started laughing at what was going on in the background, and she thought they were laughing at her, and she had a complete collapse. And Alf Doughton gave her $50 and a bunch of sandwiches to go back to San Francisco, and she gave him 6 CDVs, which I was able to find at the Nevada Historical Society and the University of Nevada. Next page.
How many more slides, Bill?
2 or 3. These are from 1879. She never had any photographs that we've been able to find. The one on the left is her marriage to Jerry Fryer, her third husband. The other one, in the center, is how she appeared in 1862 and 1892 in the San Francisco Chronicle. And the one on the right is supposedly taken at the morgue after her death due to an accidental overdose of laudanum in San Francisco. I've never been able to find that particular photo, or it probably was destroyed during the fire and earthquake, where all her belongings that were left in San Francisco were taken. She did pack a trunk about a week before she died. It was going to be sent on to El Paso, Texas, where she had worked for a while. The trunk, she died before that. The two trunks, we don't know whatever happened to them, but I did find a scrapbook at the California Historical Society that was scrapbook number 4, was hers with her signature, and I was able to transcribe it for the Historical Society because it was in rather rough shape, and it did give some highlights about her career. I think we've just got 2 more. These are the way she was represented in, you can see a baseball card, a comic book, several paintings, and some movie stars that played her. The one on the lower right is Winifred Greenwood. It was a 1913 two-reeler by Sigrid called Pauline Cushman, The Federal Spy. Paula Raymond, Catherine Alexander, Phyllis Thaxter, and Janet Blair played her in a movie in 1933 with Gary Cooper and an episode of Rawhide, and an episode of Death Valley Days, and a Cavalcade of America, and one more. These are Pauline Cushman wannabes. Not only they might be her, but we haven't been able to identify it. But these are ones that I've collected where people have written on Pauline Cushman. And so this is all part of the 80 that we've collected and part of over 13,000 photographs we have in our entire collection. So that is it. So I'm happy to show these off.
Bernie just has a comment that he's used facial recognition software to
Oh,
validate.
I've used it too, and I can put 3 identified pictures of her together on the software, and none of the 3 match, even though I know they're her. I don't trust the software. You have to have a very high resolution image if you really want to get a trustworthy result. The images that are existing there's too many variables.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you so much, Bill.
Yes.
Next up, we have Vladimir.
Hello, everybody. Hi, how are you doing? Today, I'm going to talk about the person who actually started the communication between Germany and the United States. And that was Dr. August Nagel. He was one of the first firms that created Zeiss icon. And he was the one who created famous camera named Pupil. And he was the one who created famous camera named Retina. For some reason, everything is connected with the vision, with medical terminology on vision, pupil and retina. And he also created the cassette, the container that fits both Leica and Contax. And when he joined Zeiss Icon in 1926, he left it in 1928. Why is that? Because he did not like the idea of using Zeiss lenses, because all the cameras, according to the company law, had to use Zeiss lenses, Tessar, Nova, and so on. He did not want to do that, and for that reason, at least officially, as of now, I know, he left the company. But I'm going to talk about the camera that he joined the company with. And that camera is Contessa Natel. I'm switching the cameras. Can you see the Contessa Natal? Yes. So this is the Contessa Natal camera. It's plate or flat film camera. And that's how it looks. It's in very good condition. This camera was made more than 100 years ago. Uh, 21 or 22, I'm not sure. 1921 or 1922. So it's either 101 or 102 years old, this camera. So he joined with this camera, and also I have the pocket for film. Someone put the blind slide here. You see, it's not a foil, but it's very thick foil actually, right? And this is the space where the cassette or film is being placed. So when he left the company, he allowed the company to use the name. And that's why now we have this kind of cameras, which are called Contessa. Contessa, and it is Zeiss, it carries Zeiss icon name. This is how it looks. Okay. This is Contessa. Later on, they decided to replace the name Contessa with the name Iconta. And this is the camera Iconta. See, it's basically the same design. And right, and you can definitely recognize elements from Retina. See this button, the shutter release button, and the square holder for the lens, and some other elements that would you will see later in the Retina. So my next presentation in October, Dana, I hope I will have that time in October, will be about Dr. August Nagel and his cameras, his very famous camera, his famous camera pupil, and his famous Contessa Natel, and all the movements around those cameras between him, Zeiss, and Kodak. All right, that was it for today.
Thanks, Vlad.
Sure.
Drew says, I have the Zeiss Cantina from the mid-50s and I love it.
Yes, Contina is another name for Iconta, and this is 35 millimeter film, by the way. He actually created that 35 millimeter format for German cameras.
And just quickly, Henry says, I have a NetR, that's my go-to 6x6 shooter, and I love the images and would love to have a Contessa Iconta though. So,
Yeah.
all right, folks, bear with us. We are running late. Next up, Jack Billington. 6 minutes, Jack. Jack, are you there? Seeing if Jack is still signed on.
And don't give up.
Can you
There-
hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you and I can see you.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, here we go. This starts about 30 years ago in Taunton, Massachusetts. I was up at the dog track. They had a flea market that was there. The dogs had quit running, and they made a flea market out of the place. And it was a beautiful spot for flea market because they had plenty of room. Coming out of there one day with my truck, about 9 o'clock. I had been there since 5:30 looking for cameras, and I didn't find any. And I looked way down in the corner, as far as I could see, there was a van. And in front of the van, there was a bunch of people milling all around. So I said, I gotta see what's going on. So I drove my old truck down there. And when I got out, I saw there was a guy selling antiques down there. What he was trying to do was duck the admission price, and he had got himself into the corner where he couldn't be seen by the ticket booth. Anyway, he would appear in the door with an antique, hand it to his wife. His wife would pass it over and with a price on it, get the money, and that's the way they were doing business there. So there was about 8 deep, and I couldn't yell over them to ask him if he had any cameras. So I went around and I skiddied up beside the van, and I stayed close to the metal, and I got to the open door. He come out and I says, hi. He almost died. He says, hi. I says, I'm a camera collector and I'm looking for antique cameras. Do you have one? He says, I sure do. And he reached in and handed me this case. It's kind of heavy. I know there was a camera in there. And he says, I've had this to 2 other flea markets. This is the 3rd one. He says, all I want is $5 for it. He said, if I don't sell it today, I'm going to throw it in that dumpster that's out in the middle of the field there. Well, I looked inside, and this is the camera that was in there. Was made in the 1940s. It's a Bell & Howell auto-load speedster. And I noticed that it had this funny number painted on it. I didn't know why. I thought maybe it come out of a school or something like that. But I looked in the bag. There was 2 more lenses and 2 more viewers. Then I took the camera and I tried the shutter, and I found the shutter was working. So I was in. I gave him $5 for it. When I got home, I started to look it over, and I opened up the rear door where the film goes, and right in here, there was an anchor, a white anchor painted. That means US Navy. Now I know what the numbers mean that's painted all over the camera. So I got on the computer and I looked up ship's numbers in World War II. And I found that 192, which is the number that's on this, it's on the lenses, it's on the case, was for the US Cavalli. That was a submarine that was working out of Fremantle in Australia. They were working in the Pacific Ocean with it there. It had quite a record. It had done a number of things. So another thing happened while this was in the Pacific. The guy that was in charge of the Philippine Islands was the Japanese general or admiral, I'm not sure what his rank was, that planned the attack on Pearl Harbor. And they gave him that post like a reward for the great job he done on Pearl Harbor. So he was up with some of his generals flying around the Philippines there, checking all the armament, making sure that they weren't going to get caught by a sneak attack. While they were up in the plane, and they were in a good plane, all of a sudden a big storm come up and blew the plane right down into the water. They all got out all right, but when they got out, of course, they lost a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff floated up out of the plane. The next morning, the fishermen were out there, and they seen this briefcase, and they pulled it in, and it had plans in it, and they were all in, they were soaking wet. So they took the hut, they laid the plans on the floor, and they dried them out. After they got them all dry, they got the plans to the underground. There was a pretty good underground unit there that was raising heck with the Japanese army at that time. So they got them over to the underground. The underground didn't know what they were, so they radioed back to their contacts. I don't know exactly where, probably to Fremantle. Anyway, they radioed back to the US Navy and told them they had these plans. The Navy decided they'd like to see them. So they says, we've got a submarine up there very close. We're going to send it over. The submarine and give them the plan. Well, the place that the submarine was going to go in is called Negros. It's an island right on the end of the chain of Philippine Islands. In the meantime, they put word out to the underground to tell any Americans, and there was a bunch of them, that was hiding out from the Japanese there in Japan to come over because the sub was coming in. So the way it worked was the sub got up to Negros Island, and they stayed submerged because up at the end of the island, there was a boat going back and forth, and they wasn't sure if that wasn't a Japanese radio ship. Well, they put their antenna up, they checked it, and they brought it down. The signal that everything was okay was supposed to be 2 white squares, but they didn't know where the white squares were or how they would be made. So the captain, he told them to get the ship's photographer and the 35mm equipment right up there to the periscope. It's too sweet. So this is the camera he had. This camera was made by Eastman Kodak, and it has a special adapter lens on here. This can go up against the periscope, but flat against it, and you can take a picture, and you get whatever you can see through the periscope. It's just a simple 35mm camera made by Kodak, but this adapter is a super piece of mechanism. So what the captain told me, he says, give me a 360. So they put it right up against and the executive officer took and went around with the periscope 360, and each time he went around, he give the guy a kick, and the guy pressed the button. The photographer pressed the button. When he got done, he had a chasing bag. He took the film out of the camera, went in the changing bag with it. He had a tank in there. He put the film in the tank, then he took it out and he could develop it in the light. He went developer, shortstop, hypo. Developed the film. Once he got it developed, a quick wash and a quick sponge. And then he took it, and the captain did this. And when he looked in the film, he could see 2 white bed sheets on the ground. And that was the signal everything was okay to come up. The underground figured that with them having bed sheets there, if the Japanese come by, they think they were just washing their clothes. And the way they put the 2 bed sheets, they had them corner to corner. Well, they opened the hatch on the surface of the submarine, open the hatch. There were a whole bunch of little boats come out with all these refugees. They were supposed to have 28 refugees get into the sub. As it turned out, there was 48. 48 people climbed through the conning tower and got down into that sub. One didn't go. He was the head missionary there. And he said to his wife, he says, you go with the kids. He says, I'm going back with my people. He said, if I leave them now, they'll never listen to me again about converting over to our religion. She didn't like it, but he did. He went ashore and he lived through the war and worked with the refugees. He was padre. That's what they called him.
Jack, we're over time.
I'm overtime.
Yeah.
You want me to stop?
No, if you could just finish up that.
You want me to finish?
Yeah.
Okay, because I can leave them right there in the water if you want. Anyway, they got this. I forgot where I was. Everybody got into the sub all right. The sub got out of there, and the plans also got in there. When the sub got close to Fremantle in Australia, they radioed in where they were, and they sent a destroyer out. When the destroyer come out and took the people off, and they took the plans in the destroyer and they made copies. Within about 10 or 15 minutes, a PBY come over, and that's a plane that can land in the water. It landed in the water. They gave the Z plan. This was called the Z plan. They knew it by now after they had got it. And they gave it to the guys in the PBY. They flew back to the Philippine Islands, and at dusk, they landed, and they give the plans back to the fishermen that met them out there and told them, wet them down good and give them to the Japanese and tell them you get them out of the water. Don't tell them you dried them out. So they gave them back to the Japanese. As far as the Japanese was concerned, they still had the Z plan. So that's the whole story. I can put more onto it, but it'd be a long time.
Thank you, Jack. It's good detective work. Next up, we have Dan.
Hi, thank you. And thank you, PHSNE, for doing this show and tell. I've got actually more tell than I have show. But what I wanted to do is talk about a project that I work on. I lived in Boston for 25 years, so that's kind of my remote connection here. But I live in Des Moines, Iowa now for the past 20 years. Starting in about 2000, I've been a photographer since I was 10. So starting about 2017, I began collecting and accumulating old cameras with the intention of repairs and resale. I started getting into it. I wasn't real keen on the resale after a while. And I really wanted to pay it forward in a different way. So at about the same time at work, I used to work for Wells Fargo. I was introduced to a group called the Chrysalis Foundation here in Des Moines by my manager at work. She was on the board. The Chrysalis Foundation is all about the promotion and empowerment of girls and young women to provide the greatest personal, social, and professional opportunities available. And I'd been to a number of their talks, and I was pretty excited about trying to make a connection here. But and they do this through a number of different programs. One of the programs is called the After School Program. There's an early hour out at the end of Wednesdays for the teachers to kind of catch up in the public schools here. And Chrysalis provides programming to fill that hour for girls that want to get involved in the foundation. Anyway, so I worked with Chrysalis and created this program called the Butterfly Effect for the 5th through 8th grade girls that were involved in this. And it's all about exposing them to film photography. It's like a 5-day or actually 5-hour, so 1 a week program that includes the first day is like an introduction, showing them how to work the cameras, load the film in the camera. There's a little bit of art, a little bit of science, a little bit of history. We talk about the photoelectric effect, believe it or not. Thank you, Einstein. And then on another day, we have role models come in. And these are women who are successful photographers in their own right. Some of them award-winning, many of them published from the Des Moines area. And they come in and they talk about their experiences and their successes. And try to inspire the girls. And it's not just about teaching photography, it's about exposing them to something that's, you know, to work with the camera. It's not easy. So it's expose them to something difficult, something that you really have to bring up your internal resources to overcome the issues of understanding photography and the science involved in that. Another day we go out and we do an outdoor shoot with it's typically two girls sharing the same camera, so they'll run through 16 shots each. It's black and white film. So the next session is developing that film in-house, and it's pretty exciting. There is always that aha moment when they pull the film out of the canister after development. It's like, wow, it's like, hey, you can put this stuff in the soup and it really cooks. That's amazing. So, and it's portable. I've tried to make it as simple as possible. So I've got just like a short Home Depot bucket, and, you know, developing tank. I've got some Nalgene bottles for the stop bath, the developer, and the fixer. And okay, we just dump the solutions out into that and fill from the bottles. But very exciting. And then after that, after the film dries, the next day I pick it up and I drop it off for scanning. And then the images are uploaded, and then the girls have access to that and do whatever they want. But it's amazing the quality of some of the photography that these girls come up with, some with very little experience. After a couple of years, yeah, they've done it a couple of times, but that just means they're more familiar with the equipment. But some of them really have a good vision and have found their kind of artistic voice in this. I've had a little bit of media coverage. Local news station did a piece on the butterfly effect, and I have some links to that news story, and also a link to my Facebook page and the butterfly effect page. And I'll send that to Dana, and you know, can redistribute at that point. But if you have any questions, please. Oh, I wanted to show you something. I also get the opportunity for show and tell with this because, you know, we talk about a lot of stuff and I expose them to, you know, different cameras and try to get them to imagine what it would be like to hold this thing for 5 hours in a day, taking pictures at a press corps meeting. The 3 cameras that I'm using in the program right now is the Nikon FG, the Pentax ME Super, and the Minolta XGM. And behind me, you can see 50 or 60 or so of the cameras that are in the program. I have several hundred. Many of them are still in a little bit of disrepair that need to be fixed up for presentation, but I do that. And I just wanted to show one little piece here. Since we were talking about icons and you know, German cameras, this is an East German Vera, which has Zeiss Yanel glass in it, and the film advance is a collar, you know, on the lens, which I thought was pretty cool. I haven't seen a lot of that. So that was just the last thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. What a great project. If you want to drop the links into the chat, folks can grab them from there.
I can't. I've just got a printed page that I'm looking at, but I'll send along later and
Okay,
make it explore.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chuck is up next.
Okay, am I full frame it to everybody?
Yes.
Okay, except me. My talk is actually about 127 film, which actually both Ken and Vladimir touched on. My difference between 127 and 120, if you can see there, it's just slightly smaller. but it's in full frame and a square image. You get 12 shots on either one. Or for example, on this camera here, this is another one of the vest pocket cameras, which the 127 film was made for. Came out in 1912. It is darn near very close to full medium format. If you can see how large that is, it's almost a 645 image. So you don't really need much of a lens to get a decent picture out of a piece of film that large. Another popular camera that the 127 film took was the Brownie #0 camera, which they only made about 2 million of those. Then, as Vladimir was talking about, Nagel camera started making very high quality 127 cameras. This one, basically, if it looks like a Retina, it was about 2 years short of being a Retina, because Kodak bought this company and turned it into the Retina. They basically made Retinas for the rest of their existence. A camera that he mentioned was the Pupil, which had a helicoid mount on it. And this is a good example of the versatility of the 127 film. It took a 4x4, 3x4, which this is a 3x4 camera. You'd line up the 8 exposure roll, one there, then one there, and then two there, and then two there. By the time you're done with the roll, you've taken 16 pictures, basically the size of a 35 millimeter camera. And this particular one, if you'll notice the rangefinder, that is a lights rangefinder that came with the kit. So my favorite half frame 127 camera is, I just purchased this one. It's a Plaubel Mackinac folder. Very robust build on this camera, and it's the 16 exposure camera. Probably the most popular format of the quality 127 cameras was the twin lens reflex camera. This particular one is a 1938 Rolleiflex, what they called a Sport, because it had the high speed film advance on it and the f2.8 lenses. Further development of that camera came out in the 50s. And they called this one the Gray Baby. I wonder why. And these cameras came out really not so much. This was sort of at the end in the 50s, sort of the end of the reign of the 127 film, because it had been pretty much replaced by 35 millimeter. But what attribute that these cameras had that 35 didn't have, or some of the other cameras, this was able to shoot super slides. So if you shot slide negatives with this, or positives, you could have these mounted on standard 35 millimeter slide banks, and you'd have a square image as opposed to a rectangular image with about 50% more picture available. So this kind of added the super slide aspect, sort of added another 10 years on to the 127 product cycle. Some odd ones. This is the Ricoh Matic 44. If you raise the viewing lid, this falls down. So it's sort of like a built-in case. The end of the line for 127 cameras was the Minolta Miniflex. They basically threw in the towel after making 5,000 of these, so they're fairly rare for a Japanese camera. The camera that I'm going to put a roll of film through as soon as I can is one of the few SLR cameras that were made for 127 film. This is called the Coma Flex S, and it looks like it would have interchangeable lenses, but it really was just one lens, and you had auxiliary lenses that you could put on that. Now, in the in the notes, I have, in my research, I came up with a website, filmphotographystore.com, which sells 127, 620, 110, 126 film at relatively discount prices, half of what B&H sells it for. So I have 5 rolls of 127 coming to me, I think, hopefully next week, that I'll be able to report on how well these cameras work. And I fully expect them not to work. But anyway, I'll have fun trying. That's it.
Thank you, Chuck. John has said that Chuck wrote a great article about classic cameras that use 127 for the Photographic Historical Society of Michigan, and a reproduction of that article will be in FSNE's 2024 journal.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, FSNE members have access to all of our photograms, but you have to have a password, which I will make that public in a private way, so that you can get all of our periodicals, which are really quite good because my wife writes them.
I used to use EFKA 127, EFKE. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. That was great film. I love that stuff.
That was Yugoslavian film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Lisa, you're up next. Thank you for waiting. Thanks, Chuck.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lisa Tang Liu. I live in Stoughton, Massachusetts, and I am a new member. I joined in April when I went to Photographica, which was just awesome. That was my first time there. And I believe Sid processed my my membership. Hi, Sid. So I bought this camera, the Kodak Retina, at Photographica, and this has become my favorite camera right now. I love it because it's so small. I can just like stuff it in my purse and go everywhere with it. I went back to film during the pandemic, and I started processing my own film again. And I never did color until recently, until last year, but I do my own color as well. So yeah, I'm gonna. I actually did some research on this camera, and I heard of Dr. August Nagel for the first time when I was looking into this camera. I didn't know anything about it, so I thank you guys for the opportunity to actually, you know, give me a kick in the butt to look this up. So I'm gonna share some slides. Let me see my PowerPoint. Where is it? Okay, I'm trying to share and I'm sorry, here it is. Okay, share. And can everybody see the PowerPoint? Yes, okay, I'm gonna put it in slide view. Okay, awesome. So here it is. I bought this for $15. It's such a bargain. And everything worked. I forgot who it was who helped me out when I was buying it, but he checked it out for me and made sure that the shutter was accurate. So yeah, it's been running fine. So I just found these facts out this morning when I was looking. I have a Retina 1A, and so it was manufactured between 1951 and 1954. It's one of the later ones. The earliest one was, I think, manufactured in 1930s. And it was, I'm sorry, this one only has a viewfinder, but no rangefinder. I normally use a Holga. I actually shoot Holgas a lot. And so I guess I'm kind of used to that. But this one is more harder for me to use because I have to like guesstimate the distance for myself. So it was good practice. It's been good practice. And so it was manufactured in Germany, as was talked about by Vlad earlier. One of the first cameras to use the 35mm film cartridge created by Kodak. And here's the lens. And I'm going to show just some of the pictures that I took. Pretty quick. So this was taken in Mount Auburn Cemetery out in Cambridge. I only actually processed 3 rolls so far. I took about 5, but I'm kind of backed up with my development. So I'm just showing some of my 3 rolls. Sorry, I took a picture of this toilet because it's really pretty. I don't know if you've ever used the bathrooms at Mount Auburn Cemetery, but it's just beautiful. And there was this light coming in, and I was testing out how it will work indoor with less light. So this was like a 5.6 or something. This was about around 1 o'clock, I think. So the light was pretty harsh. Mount Auburn. This is done on, I think, out in Cambridge in Harvard Square in August. And this film has become my favorite film, the Cinestill 800T, because the exposure latitude is just so good. It's so versatile. It's the same roll through Harvard Yard. This is the Natural History Museum at Harvard. Indoor. Fenway. Cambridge. So I think if it's like a sunny day, it's like I can just put on F16 and it's very easy. But like when it's darker, it's harder for me to focus. And this is the Griffin Museum of Photography, the pond outside. And that's it. Very short.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and welcome.
Thank
Those
you.
are great photographs and a great camera. I want to thank everybody for their stories and their cameras and their images. This is really a wonderful way for everybody to sort of interact and hang out together. And by all means, like get together and go shoot together. If you're new, Lisa, reach out, you know. And also, I wanted to mention that next month in January, I don't have the date in front of me. It's, I think, the 5th, perhaps, first Sunday after New Year's in January. Krista Dix, who's the executive director of the Griffin, will be our speaker. So she will be speaking about the museum, the Griffin Museum of Photography in Winchester, and her work with the photographers and artists there. One more thing, I just wanted to say that I did go to Adam Davis's talk that he had at Harvard with Tatiana Cole, who's one of the conservators there. And he gave a wonderful presentation about historical images, sharing images by Black photographers throughout, the beginning of photography through contemporary times, some really great portraiture. And if you're on his Instagram, he's having a GoFundMe for his dog, Carmen. So please check out Adam's Instagram. And everyone, thank you again. I really, I love these. It's been a great evening. And John, I don't know if you wanted to say anything to wrap it up and close us out.
No, Dana, I think you summed it up quite nicely. It was a great evening. Went a bit longer, I think, than we expected, or maybe we didn't expect. People have great stories, and I thank everyone for sharing them. And again, I want to thank Dana for putting this on for like the 5th time, I think, since COVID hit. So yeah, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy
Thanks.
holidays.
Happy holidays to all. Wonderful to see everyone. And
Good night.
if you would like to share at another meeting, do a short 5-minute show and tell, you can always email me at programs at FSNE.org with it fits you into an upcoming meeting. We did fill up like quickly with the spots tonight. So thank you for everyone who signed up. And we look forward to seeing you in January.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Happy New
Happy
Year.
holidays.
Good night.
Good
night.
night.